He went with his mistress while I took care of his ailing mother. What I did shocked him because for more than 10 years, I had been taking care of Dave's mother, Anna, cleaning up after her, helping her with necessities, massaging her legs, and turning her over in bed. It wasn't until she died that I finally had a chance to relax, and this time, Dave suggested a family road trip, which excited me. Dave stopped me at the door just as we were ready to leave with all the luggage loaded into the car, when he said, "There's no room in the car, you can go next time." Our son Nelson chimed in next to him. "You're not young anymore, Mom. It's a long ride, and you'll just complain about your back hurting again." After our daughter Daisy walked past me without saying anything and got into the car, everyone left except for me. The following day, Dave shared a photo of our 2 kids on social media, showing his close friend, a woman. This was the reality. And I had been stuck at home for years caring for his mother in bed while my husband traveled across the nation with her standing on the balcony. I adjusted my reading glasses and looked at I recognized everyone in the pictures Dave shared, including my husband, Dave, and my kids, Nelson and Daisy, who are the closest people in my life. They appeared so content, and then I remembered that 2 years prior, on Thanksgiving, I had wanted to take a family portrait on the couch. What had they said at the time? "Too much trouble, let's do it the next time, no one takes those corny family photos." My hands shook a little as I gripped my phone, and I realized that they simply didn't want to take a picture with me. However, without my knowledge, they had long since gathered around another woman, taking a lot of those cheesy family portraits. I knew her as Elena, who had been our college classmate Dave's kindred spirit, as he used to call her. I left the balcony and returned to the house, which was now incredibly empty. I wandered around the house, but nothing had changed, and everything appeared empty today. I had spent years caring for Dave's mother, Anna, who had been bereaved and couldn't be left alone for even a moment. Dave's son had never wanted to look after her, and he always had an excuse: "I'm a man, it's not when they all went on vacation or holiday to travel and have fun, I stayed behind to clean dirty sheets and wash dirty clothes." I would daydream while working, waiting for them to come home and tell me about the places I had never seen, but when Nelson and Daisy returned, they would be too busy with school, so at least Dave would bring me a gift, which was the nicest thing ever. Only when he put an arm around my shoulder and said, "You've worked so hard, this family really couldn't function without you, Jodie's marriage to you was the best choice I've ever made." I grew up in the country with men who were rough around the edges, and every time Dave said something sweet, my heart felt light as if it were soaked in honey. I went to the bedroom and took out a small box that contained my collection of memories. A scarf, and a few. He had placated me with these items for more than 30 years. Then I remembered the scarf around Elena's neck in the picture, which had the recognizable LV logo printed on it. I had seen dried flowers, 2 postcards, a chipped seashell, and a pair of small ceramic figurines. Looking at them now, I realized how inexpensive they were, little trinkets likely purchased from roadside stalls. When Dave gave me the dried flowers, he smiled and said, "Looking back now, wasn't that the truth? Our marriage had been just like those. Fresh flowers wither in days, but these dried ones will last forever." Son had bought his girlfriend one, and the little strip of fabric alone was worth more than most of my wardrobe. If he thought that dried flowers were better, then why was Elena holding a fresh bouquet of roses in that same photo? The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I called Dave, but he took his time answering, and when he did, his voice was low and impatient. "Make it quick." I didn't bother with politeness, so the car didn't have space for me, but it did have space for Elena. There was a brief pause before he frantically came up with an excuse. Elena was just a friend, and she helped book the hotel for me and the kids. What, are you jealous of her? Now I laugh bitterly because, of all the hotels in the world, only she was able to book one, and I could have done the same. I heard a faint voice calling Dave's name from the other end. He didn't argue or try to explain, just dismissed me with the words, "Stop talking nonsense, don't go around spreading rumors. Elena is a dear friend, nothing more. What I didn't bring you is this." Deep breath before delivering the final blow, or was it special? Did the hotel she booked come with someone to undress you in softer sheets? He hung up shortly after I received a message from Nelson's mother, who had secured us a substantial hotel discount through her friend Daisy. "I'm keeping an eye on Dad for you, and they're completely above board, so there's nothing to worry about. In addition, I ordered a new computer, which should arrive tomorrow. Please move it into my room when it does." I'm thankful because, like his father, Dave, he always talked about how much he loved his mother and cared for her. He would sigh and tell people how difficult it was and how much he wished he could do more for her, but in all those years, the only time he ever shed a tear for her was when he laughed a dry, hollow laugh, which made me too weak to sit in a car for very long, but not weak enough to lift a heavy computer for him. I just thought, how dare they treat me like this, as I looked at the picture once more and then down at my own rough, calloused hands. I wiped the tears from my eyes and began looking for Elena's account on every social media site I could think of. It didn't take long to locate her, and I then began scrolling through her pictures. I followed them back in time one by one, and it turned out that every few months they took a trip together. Sometimes they went alone, and other times they brought Nelson and Daisy. This had been going on for years, and they had never missed a trip. These pictures had most likely been on Dave's account the entire time. He had just made sure that I alone, couldn't see them because I had been too busy to talk to friends for years and was too tired to keep up. I had been so careful with Anna that she never even developed a bedsore because I bathed her, massaged her, and turned her over. Every single day. If he hadn't messed up this time and forgotten to block me, I might still be sitting at home waiting for him to return like every other time, but there was one thing I couldn't do apart from my never-ending cycle of housework, washing sheets, scrubbing floors, and cooking meals. Realize that if Dave truly loved Elena, why hadn't he married her? After all, he had been the one to pursue me and insist on getting married. I wasn't always a weary housewife. Once, I was the type of woman that everyone in town noticed. I was intelligent, independent, and, as some have said, even tougher than most men. My mother had raised me by herself, working long hours in a small-town diner just to make sure I received a good education. I graduated from high school with great grades, and my future was open to me. However, in a town like mine, rumors spread more quickly than the truth, so I didn't care what people said until the night I was followed home by some local thugs. I wasn't some defenseless girl waiting to be saved. Instead, I grabbed a baseball bat and sent them fleeing, but the story changed after that. She's too aggressive for any man to ever date. Want her? She must have done something to rile them up. If I had done something wrong, why would she be out so late? Should I have just stood there and let them attack me to prove I was late? The police arrested those men, but I was left with the whispers and stares. My mother stayed up at night worrying that if this continued, no one would ever want to marry you. Then Dave changed everything. He was a college student. One of the few people in our town who had achieved success. One day, in the middle of the busiest cafe in town, he slipped a love letter into my hands. Unfazed by the rumors, he declared loud and clear that this girl was deserving of love, and the town abruptly stopped talking. Everyone called me lucky to have been picked by such a respectable man, and I was thankful to Dave for that. When he left, he vowed to love me, cherish me, and be faithful to me for the rest of my life, and I stood beside him hand in front of the minister, saving every penny I could to buy him new clothes and shoes when he started working. I also ran the household, raised our kids, took care of my parents, and became the ideal wife, mother, and daughter-in-law. However, if he had always loved Elena, why hadn't he just told me why he had married me? The only thing of his that was in front of me was his favorite suit, which was neatly hanging in the living room. I grabbed it, threw it on the floor, and stomped on it, but it wasn't enough. I needed more. I stormed through the house in search of something. I felt like I wanted to slap his heart repeatedly, but he wasn't there. That would make me feel less helpless. Dave liked to act like a sophisticated intellectual, and his study was stocked with pricey books, notebooks, and limited edition signed novels that he was extremely proud of. He only wore expensive shirts, all of which had to be immaculately ironed. His leather shoes had to be shined every day, and he loved fishing. I had always been a fisherman. Blazing with fury, I grabbed his precious fishing rod and snapped it in half, then stormed into his study and yanked a stack of books off the shelf and was about to rip them apart, but I hesitated. That would be too easy. These were valuable, worth money. I was the one who cleaned and organized his gear after every trip. I had done so much for him, and what had I gotten in return? A slow, cold smile spread across my lips. I marched into the bedroom, took out a suitcase, and began packing it full of his first editions, handwritten notes, and prized signed novels, every last one of them. Then, I zipped up the suitcase, grabbed the handle, and left with my head held high. I had an old friend who worked at the city library, and we hadn't seen each other in years aside from Athos time. After a quick meeting at the hospital where we exchanged pleasantries, I arrived at the library's doors with my suitcase behind me. When he saw what I had brought, his eyes widened in amazement. "Jod, these books and notebooks are incredible. Are you sure you want to give them all away?" I replied, "Cool, Dave has moved on to finer things. To him, keeping them at home is a waste because they are nothing more than discarded relics." He practically held a limited edition leather-bound classic in his hands, saying, "It would be better to donate these books so that true book lovers can appreciate them. These books are impossible to find on the market now, so keeping them in the family would be a legacy. Are you sure you don't want to save them for your kid's legacy?" he asked, his fingers tracing the spines of the signed editions. His head bobbed quickly. Of course I want them, these are priceless. I watched him clutch those books, like buried treasure, and I couldn't help but sneer inwardly as I said, "They're yours to keep." What family did I have? My kids didn't even care about me, so why would they treasure these books enough? I booked a train ticket to Chicago because it was the first time I had ever sat in a train this comfortable. The world had changed, there were countless travel guides online, and even a woman traveling alone could find her way. I've got places to be for the first time in a long time, and the weight in my chest has slightly decreased. I turned on my heels and went home to pack this time, not waiting for an invitation. I've only ever taken the cheapest Greyhound buses. On my first trip, Dave had already moved to the city for work and invited me to visit him. The bus was packed, with two huge men crammed into it so that I could hardly breathe, and another man had taken off his shoes. The musty smell of the old bus combined with the rancid smell made my head spin, but I held on. Refused to spend the extra money on a plane ticket, but now that I had to ask myself, for whom was I even saving money? Something inside of me snapped, and I got up from my seat and went to the train's cafe car to buy myself a sandwich and a hot cup of coffee. I knew it wasn't much, but compared to the times when I was pinching every penny in half, it felt like a luxury. Why had I lived my entire life scrounging and making sacrifices? Only for others to benefit from it as I sat back and sipped my first cup of coffee, genuinely enjoying the moment, when my phone vibrated and I received a text from Daisy's mom asking what I had bought, why I was using Dad's credit card, and why I was being so careless. The money was intended for renovations to my apartment, but my dear daughter was so upset that a few dollars had her in a panic. I was about to respond when she sent me another text, this time asking more. I'm not saying that you can't spend money, but I'm asking you to think about it more. I didn't even ask for a car, just some assistance with my place, and now you're taking that away too. I was alive, but they were already figuring out how I was going to spend my money. I typed out my response, making sure that every word was clear, and I used your "if you have a problem with your father's credit card, talk to him about it. However, keep in mind that half of that money is mine, even if he wanted to give it to you. You didn't ask for a car, of course, but you did study abroad for 3 years, which cost over $100,000. At the same time, your brother is attending a state university and barely makes $1,000 a month. Tell me who has spent more, and let me be clear, I am. The world was so much larger than the small box I had been living in for decades, and I wasn't going to let her ruin my mood. My money is mine to spend however I see fit, and even if I threw it into a fireplace to watch it burn, it wouldn't be any of your business. I then turned off my message notifications outside the window. I had spent decades in that small town, where the hospital waiting room was the most crowded place I had ever seen. Out of habit, I almost booked the cheapest motel I could find, telling myself there was no need to splurge, but then I remembered Deus's message, how she and her father had spent their vacations relaxing in 5-star resorts and soaking in hot springs. And how they had never once questioned their spending. Why was the young woman at the front desk greeting me with a warmth that felt strange after so many years of politeness without a hint of luxury, and the lobby smelled different, like luxury itself, with a scent? A grand crystal chandelier sparkled above me, casting prisms of light across the gleaming marble floors polished so smooth they reflected every movement. The only person expected to be frugal, so I did the exact opposite. She processed my check-in without grinning at me because she had to receive something in return, but she was still kind. Before long, I was floating in a bed that was so soft that I realized it was no wonder Dave and Elena looked so young. This was how they lived when they traveled, and when they woke up, they were surrounded by comfort and hospitality from people whose entire job it was to make sure they were happy and carefree. It was to make their experience pleasant. In the meantime, I woke up every morning to the sound of an alarm, burdened by countless chores. My daily routine involved negotiating with market vendors over small amounts of meat and vegetables, trying to prolong each cent to make it last, and arguing over shortchanged portions. If I had known that all of my saving and scrimping would only be used by someone else, I would have stopped haggling years ago. When I woke up the following morning and realized that I had just spent over $400 for a single night's stay, my stomach knotted, and my chest ached even more when I remembered that Dave had been spending this kind of money for years. Nevertheless, I had a city to explore, and the front desk girl was just as happy as the previous evening, carefully outlining the best way to take the I asked her, hotels like this are always this expensive, right, no matter where you go, before I left the train for Millennium Park. He gave me a perplexed look. Ma'am, this isn't a luxury hotel, we're just a chain of budget-friendly business hotels. 5-star hotels charge way more. Seeing my expression, she promptly assisted me in downloading an app to compare hotel prices and make reservations in Curious. I looked up the $1,800 hotel Dave and the kids were staying at one night. I went outside and stood in the middle of a busy Chicago street, watching the waves of people go by. I laughed, Jodie, because you are such a joke. All this time, you thought you were living in luxury, but it turns out you weren't even close to touching their leftovers. I asked a stranger to take a picture for me. The last time I had taken a picture was with Dave during our wedding shoot, back when my hair was thick, my smile was bright, and my voice was 3 times louder than anyone else's. However, my face was lined with exhaustion, and my hair was streaked with white. It seemed as though these decades of marriage had drained me dry, but the moment didn't feel that way. I couldn't tell if Dave Jod's panic was genuine or merely for show, but I calmly replied, I'm in Chicago, when his phone rang last night. He hesitated for a second before yelling, what are you doing running off like that? You've never traveled far before. What if something happens to you? Didn't I already tell you? We promised to take you the next time, so why are you acting like a child at your age? Then came the real problem, and even if you're going out, could you at least try to be frugal? You're spending way too much money. After just one day, you've already spent nearly $600. I cut him off $786, and he remained silent as I repeated, slowly and clearly, between the train and the hotel food ticket, I spent $786 yesterday, which isn't even half the price of a single night at your hotel. Tell me, Dave, why I'm the only one in this family who needs to be frugal and why my spending is the only thing that irritates you. I had never asked him about money before, so perhaps that's why he was taken aback. If he blurted out, that's different, you don't earn money the second the words leave your mouth. The kids are working now, Jod, and they're under a lot of stress. This trip was meant to help them relax, so why are you comparing yourself to the kids? Whatever's done is done, you spent the money, so you should be happy now, right? But listen, the world isn't safe these days, so you should come home. Nothing is happening at home right now, so pick up my books while you're there. I thought maybe what needed some fresh air was your damn brain, Dave, but then I realized that I had almost forgotten that I had donated all of his books. The image of Dave entering his study expecting his shelves to be full of valuable books, and discovering that they were empty nearly made me laugh. He dared to tell me to take his books off the shelves and let them air out for me. I let Elena do it right away and said, smirky, isn't she always so eager to help Jod? What's wrong with you lately? Why are you so obsessed with Elena? I hung up because I didn't want to let him ruin such a lovely day by dragging me into his filth. Friends, you truly had no shame using that word. I spent the entire morning at the Art Institute of Chicago, making my way through hallways lined with. When I eventually went outside, I boarded the subway once more and headed toward the historic district. At a small Italian restaurant, I rewarded myself with a real Chicago deep dish pizza, enjoying every bite. From there, I traveled to Navy Pier and watched the Ferris wheel slowly turn against the evening sky as night fell. When I finally boarded the train home, the more I witnessed, the more certain I became that my husband and children had abandoned me, which was not my fault, and if they had so readily cast me aside, then there was no reason for me to hold onto them any longer. During my trip, I saw families traveling together, parents holding their children's hands, adult children pushing their elderly parents in wheelchairs, and all of them laughing and enjoying their time together. They returned 2 days early and brought Elena with them, and as soon as Nelson walked through the door, he said, Mom, we have a guest, Daisy. Without even looking at me, she kicked off her shoes and went straight for the front door, but when she saw it was empty, she turned back with a frown and asked, why didn't you get any juice? I texted you on the way home, and I stared icily at Nelson. If you're planning to replace me, there's no rush. Take a few more days, then invite whoever you want over. Then I turned to Daisy and asked how much you paid me to be your maid. Daisy blinked, perplexed. Mom, what are you talking about? Elena laughed lightly and settled down on my couch. Dave said you didn't understand everything, and he wanted me to clarify that it was merely a coincidence that I happened to run into them. On this, I made that throw pillow myself, so it would be a shame if she threw it away. Some people like eating steak in their youth and end up eating it in their later years, but tastes change, so who can say that this was just a funny little mix-up? Jodie, we've known each other for years. If there was truly something between me and Dave, why would he have pursued you back? I can say with certainty that I looked her in the eye and grinned. I'm not sure what Dave was thinking, but I do think it's interesting when a man and a woman conveniently go on trips every few months. It's hard to think that's because they're tired of their regular meals and don't want anything dirtier. Elena's smile froze. What exactly are you implying? She said, her voice a little sharper now, making disgusting accusations without any proof. She scoffed and added, proof? Do you enjoy slandering others? No wonder you had such a terrible reputation back in town, and to think Dave used to say you were kind, he misjudged you. Daisy looked between us, rolling her eyes, and then stomped off to her room when she realized I wasn't considering her. Nelson, on the other hand, was eager to jump To his new mother's defense, Mom. I interrupted him with a slap, and the sound reverberated throughout the room as Nelson clutched his face, eyes wide with shock, saying, Mom, you hit me. I nodded, and if you keep lying, I'll do it again. You're being ridiculous. Aunt Elena came here out of kindness to clear up this misunderstanding between you and Dad. However, nothing came out. Was this the first time you happened to run into her while traveling, or has it happened every time I've taken a stack of pictures and thrown them at him? What a great son I raised, so obedient and filial to someone else's mother, but when you get home, I'm just a servant to you, isn't that right? Now, tell me how it is that she just so happens to retreat to the couch's corner, silently, and Elena's eyes darkened as she looked at the pictures. What exactly do these prove? She asked, her voice colder. Now we're just travel companions, it's not like we did anything inappropriate. She laughed a little. What did you think Dave should have taken you instead? She asked, raising an eyebrow. Tell me, Jod, do you truly grasp the meaning of travel? Do you think you and Dave could ever connect on that level, and could you ever stand in front of the Grand Canyon and appreciate its grandeur? She leaned forward a little as though giving me advice, saying that people should be aware of their place. To be honest, considering your past, you should be thankful that Dave married you at all and never abandoned you in spite of everything. Tell me if we took the same entrance exam, didn't we? I remember that your score was dozens of points lower than mine. I smiled and got into university, but I said, Ellen, do you think you're superior? I tilted my head and asked, if you were in his shoes, could you look at your reflection every day and feel love? Dave's voice echoed behind me, Jod, when did you get so bitter? Why are you humiliating Elena? He scoffed, so what if Elena took the college entrance exam 3 times? That just proves she's persistent, and you had the chance to get into a mediocre college. Her face briefly twitched before quickly returning to normal. What right do you have to judge her? I took a deep breath, put down my cup calmly, and then turned to face him. My eyes were as sharp as a blade, and you dared to say that I scored higher than you if you could have gotten into college. Have you conveniently forgotten why I never went? It was because you had me running around doing your chores in the days before when your mother fled at the mention of money. I paid for your tuition, bought you those brand new shirts so you wouldn't look like a beggar in college, and kept you afloat when your own family didn't give a damn. Now you dare stand here and call me a failure. I missed my application deadline because you needed me to clean up after you. I took a step closer, my voice cold and steady. Nelson, who had been conveniently silent up until this point, suddenly jumped in to defend them, saying, Mom, that's enough. Can't you just talk without attacking people? I laughed sharply. Dave's face turned bright red, whether from shame or anger, but I didn't care. His fists were clenched tightly at his sides. Joy, you're a bitter, cruel woman beside him. Elena placed a gentle hand on his arm, adopting her usual fragile, pitiful expression, and stared him down. Okay, then you tell me why Elena always takes your dad on vacations instead of me. You 3 go off on your little adventures, and when you get home, I'm supposed to play with you. Tell me, Nelson, do you see me as your mother? Or just a free housekeeper? Nelson opened his mouth, then closed it again. You seem like the victim, so I went on with my Daisy's voice is steady and unrelenting, and she constantly complains that I favor you over her. You two are so perfectly in sync that every time you both got into trouble, Daisy confessed her mistakes, but you stood there talking back with your stiff neck. Did I not ask for your opinion before she went abroad? You agreed, but now you feel that it was unfair, and you want to talk about favoritism because you believe that I chose to spend money on Elena rather than you. Nelson's face twisted as he looked at me and then at Dave, who refused to meet his eyes. Eventually, without saying anything more, he stomped off to his room, the last quiet I heard. Father, set your allowance, not me. The only extra money you ever received came from my savings. I let my eyes wander back to Elena, my tone sharp, and guess where that money went? Into their little vacations. Every cent you thought I had saved for you was spent on them. I spoke calmly and resolutely to Dave, and he hadn't even processed what I had said when Elena gasped, No, you can't divorce him. Her normally composed demeanor cracked, and she looked frantic. What does that make me? If you two split up, it will ruin my reputation, and I haven't done anything inappropriate. Dave, on the other hand, remained completely unfazed. Holding Elena's hand, he asked in a smug, almost amused tone, Are you sure? You want to finish this, Jod? Let's face it, you're useless on your own. After this, no one will hire you. I laughed slowly and coldly. You have the gall to say, you support me. Tell me, Dave, do you have any? You have no idea how much you owe me. Hiring a nurse for a bedridden patient costs at least $2,000 per month. I looked after your mother for 16 years, and you wore fancy clothes while you were in college, which I paid for by sewing all night. Your first job only paid you $1,500 per month, and in the meantime, I raised 2 kids and took on sewing work to keep our home running. Now, after everything I've done for you, whether it was anger or shame, Dave's face was burning with color, but I didn't care. I took a stack of papers out of my bag and put them on the table to signify that we're settling this tomorrow. Dave grabbed the divorce papers, looked over the terms, and then, with a sly smile, tore them to shreds, destroying half of my assets. I'm still hoping that I'll give you at most $15,000. Dave sneered, there's no reasoning with you. I nodded. Okay, Dave, just remember you chose this. I picked up my bag and turned toward the door behind me. His voice rang out one last time. Are you sure you want to do this, Dave? I smiled. I'm giving you an easy way out, a clean break so you and your good friend can finally live happily ever after. You're leaving, the house isn't even clean yet, and I didn't turn around. The following morning, I set up shop directly outside Dave's office building. Next to me, I posted a large poster board with images and information about Dave and Elena's grand love story. A crowd gathered, and I wasn't ashamed at all when someone asked. I vividly described how he was a cold man and how Dave had always played the part of the principled man, babbling to anyone who would listen about loyalty and responsibility. Today, I was going to tear that mask off his face. His coworkers tried to step in, pacing around nervously in an attempt to calm me down, but what's the point of this? One of them leeched off his wife for half his life, building himself up by draining me, then turning around and trying to kick me out with nothing. I turned to face him, my lips curling into a chilly smile. Enjoy my life, I sneered. Maybe Dave was wrong. But you don't have proof that anything physical happened between him and Elena, do you? Why don't we just get him to apologize? You've been together for so long, you should be enjoying your life by now. Why go through all this trouble? It's so messy. Life, the life of cooking and cleaning, or perhaps you were discussing the privilege of cleaning floors while someone else is on vacation on a tropical island. I folded my arms in anticipation of this blessing you mentioned, but before he could make another excuse, his mouth closed. His phone rang, and he answered it, looking more and more uncomfortable as he listened, and then his eyes widened in surprise after hanging up. Where the hell did you put Dad's books, notebooks, and signed editions? He turned to me, flustered, and said, You need to stop this, Jod. Dave's in the hospital. I gave him a slow, indifferent blink, which worries me because I'm worried about how you should be telling Elena. His lips formed a tight line, and he let out a defeated sigh. A few moments later, my phone buzzed, and his voice was desperate, almost tearful. When he went to his study this morning and discovered that the books were gone, he collapsed on the spot. I had to skip work to take him to the hospital, Mom. I understand that you're upset with him, but why take it out on his books? That's childish. I nearly laughed just now, and he still thought I was just having a fit. Did your father not tell you? I asked. He took a deep breath, obviously trying to reason with me. Look, I know you didn't throw those books away, you know how valuable they are. Just tell me where you hid them, and I'll come get them. Calmly, I'm divorcing him, Nelson scoffed at force, saying, after all these years, come on, Mom, let's not be dramatic. Look, I'll even apologize for him. I smirked. You're right, I didn't throw them away. There was a brief pause before I delivered the blow, so I smiled and said, Tell your father to come to the library if he wants to see them again, if they even let him touch them. Nelson's mother became frightened. You know you're joking, right? This isn't funny. You can't just do that. How could you be? I hung up and blocked him. After that, I turned back to my audience and continued telling the story of Dave. I knew those books and notes meant a lot to Dave, but I never imagined him to be this fragile. All it took was losing his collection and being teased by some coworkers, and then he had a stroke. Daisy told me, Mom, Dad had a stroke. Do you want to come see him? She didn't sound panicked like Nelson did, but I thought I should at least ask because there was something hollow in her voice. For a while, I felt the usual want to console her and say something, but I suppressed it because she was 30 years old and no longer the young girl who used to wrap her arms around me. It seemed like she wasn't expecting anything at all from me. In the end, I just said, I won't be coming this time, while whispering, I love you most, Mommy. Circumstances would just complicate the divorce, so I would sue him rather than waste time in court. I rented a place in a senior living community in a calm coastal city after waiting, and I found peace there. We played cards in the common area and took strolls around the friends and women who each had their own stories and challenges. Seashore, and occasionally I even assisted them in mending their clothing. Whenever their kids visited, they would bring me tiny presents now and then, like a scarf, a box of tea, or a collection of handcrafted soaps. Even though I had sacrificed everything for the children I raised, people were still eager to show me kindness. Well, all they had left for me to consider was their lack of interest. After a year-long divorce struggle, Dave attempted to utilize his contacts to delay the proceedings, but ultimately, he couldn't stop the inevitable. After the court's decision, he was compelled to divide our assets equally, which caused Elena to take care of his health, but his agreement only ended up costing him more in court bills. She stayed with him for a while, but one day she couldn't bear to live with a guy who had lost his influence and prestige. She packed up and departed without saying anything because Nelson and Daisy had long since had enough of their mess. The same kids who previously depended on him for financial support now have their concerns. Incapable of providing for him, therefore, he was placed in a nursing facility. I never visited him. That period of my life was my days were lighter than I could have ever anticipated following the divorce, so I stayed in. Before starting a community crafts program, I spent a year in the seaside town doing activities that I truly enjoyed. I took up minor sewing projects, learned how to weave, and even put up a tiny stand for tailoring and adjustments. I wasn't rich, but I was free every day for the first time in my life. I occasionally traveled by rail to new locations, not the lavish getaways Dave had enjoyed, but just carefree. I travel wherever I choose, and one day, while on a trip, I met a woman my age, and we discussed life and family. She said with a smile that having a nice husband isn't the most essential thing in a woman's life, rather, it's having a heart that doesn't. That evening, as I sat by the shore with a hot cup of coffee and watched the sun set over the ocean, I realized that one may chain down. Ocean, I experienced a change within me, and was at peace for the first time. Years later, I realized that I no longer needed to meet everyone's expectations. Daisy contacted me later. Her voice sounded different, more mature, and free of the charges that had previously permeated her speech. "Mom, I'm being serious this time. Would you like to spend some time with me?" I laughed. "Daisy. One is constantly concerned about me wasting your money," so she hesitated before responding, speaking in a softer tone than usual. "I didn't comprehend things back then, Mom. I assumed you were in charge of everything at home. However, although I don't expect your forgiveness, I do want to make amends because I know that many things were never meant to be." Among my errors, I looked out to the ocean, where the waves smashed against the coast as they always did, seemingly. Even though I understood that everything had changed, I chose not to say yes. I ended the conversation, but I didn't say no either. Let me finish traveling the world first, and then I'll give it some thought. I put on the jacket I made myself and went to the dock to meet my buddies so we could watch the fishing boats arrive. Why would I stop now when my life was just getting started?